Thank you very much, everyone, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you to Board Connect and to my fellow panelists and moderator and the attendees. Uh, I come from basically accounting, auditing, and compliance background. I'm a chartered accountant, cost accountant, and company secretary by qualification. And I've been a registered valuer and insolvency professional in the last few years. So my expertise is dealing with my clients. So for us, the different kinds of industry, service industry, manufacturing, trading, and we work with a lot of those companies. But before coming into my practice, I was in corporate job for 20 years. So my introduction to the board was as a company secretary. So I've seen up close the board for the last 20 years before coming into my practice. About 18 years, wherever I was working, I started my career with garment manufacturing company in Ludhiana, a small private limited company. From there, I shifted to RPG Group. I was with Spencer Group, one of those group companies, in a JV company with a foreign multinational joint venture partner. That's where my culture to board came in. I used to go as a young woman in the boardroom to see the board of directors functioning, and that's how my introduction to the board came in. How people behave, what is expected, how they deliver whatever end result they have to deliver. All those things I've seen up close from there. I have a small stint of working in China for 3 years. So my exposure to corporate world has been a CFO, a small CFO for MSMEs. Basically, I moved with my husband wherever he moved. So along with that, I kept my career alive for 15 years when my child was growing up. So I was in a corporate job. At the same time, I was giving care for my family wherever is required. Moved with my husband to China. When he moved to Saudi, I was managing from here. But at any point in time, I never left my career. That's the point. As a women independent director, I wanted to say. So that's how my experience to that came in. Once my family is settled, I started my practice. It was just not a thought process. My partner whose son and my son used to go to the same music class. We used to say she was a banker and ex, VP of Reliance Industries. She said, I'm going to set up a practice. Would you mind coming? That's how we started into a venture. When we started into our practice, we never knew what we are going to deal in this part of the country, in Mumbai, in a Navi Mumbai, a women-led firm. And that's how our practice started. But when we came into the practice, everything was new. GST was new. Company law was new. We were taking up, SEBI's LODRs and together at that point in time. So we diverse into multiple areas. Today, I'm a visiting faculty in college teaching, finance and accounting for students. And one such, and I'm a avid trainer for people on finance for non-finance people. And that's how in those process, and I'm a speaker in the company secretary and CA institutes, various forums. And that's how somebody noticed me somewhere and said, why don't you sit and come on the board of National Plastics? So for me, the board journey is just an year and a half. But I said, my introduction to board is 20 years ago. I worked with the corporate boards, had the best of the directors on the board and seen them working. But today, if you ask me, in the last 1.5 years or so in my board journey, I mentor people for sitting on the board for finance. But me as an independent director, I would say that experience is very, very interesting in the sense I'm an auditor by profession. So whatever the professional qualification required for an auditor, I see it is required for an independent director. And that's how my skill set supplement and complement what I do in my professional life and in the professional life of being an independent director. The professional skepticism and all those things does matter a lot. And that's how I sit in the audit committee, NRC, and stakeholders committee. So being a member of these three committees, my exposure to the board has been holistic in the sense, we added. I would say one thing, board position is just not a fancy job. It's a much of responsibility rather than, it's a title to carry. And if we take that into our mind and go to the board accordingly, how as we proceed, we'll discuss further. So this is what is my professional journey and my journey into the boardroom. And I, as Santosh has said, or Muralidharan has said, I also work with the startups in a very close fashion. I've been mentor with IIT Chennai's incubation center and Mumbai's IIT's incubation center. And that's where we handhold startups right from being a registered valuer, we do valuation for them. We tell them to how to get the valuation done, how to get them funding and things like that. So my experience has been with a startup board as an advisor, as an independent director on a listed company board, and as a corporate secretary, company secretary, seeing the board work up close. That's what is my journey has been.
Thank you, Ms. Rama. Wonderful, wonderful hearing from all of you. Now, I'll move to my question. It's for Muralidharan sir. See, sir, it's being said that the role of independent director is very crucial in today's competitive business landscape. What are your thoughts on that? Is it so?
Absolutely. I think, there are multiple, I would say, reasons where I believe independent directors can add value to companies, right? Number first is basically starts with enhanced governance and oversight, right? Because, independent directors can always bring an unbiased perspective, right? Because, many time as management, you're so glued to things, you're so much into things. There is always an emotional aspect of it. There is always political angles to it. There is conflict of interest. Some of these things drive certain decisions, right? And this is where, as an independent director, one can actually bring in an unbiased perspective, free from any internal politics or conflicts of interest, etc., so that the overall interests of all the shareholders and stakeholders are protected. I think that's where there is a lot of thing which is there. So to that extent, what happens is it gives, while the management is responsible for the day-to-day execution, the board is not. The independent directors on the board can basically hold the executive team and make them accountable for the decisions that they take for the performance that they deliver, right? And thereby protecting the overall shareholders' interest. Obviously, I'm putting it a more of a general overall shareholders and stakeholders' interest. While if you go by definition of SEBI and other things, it will be protection of minority shareholders' interest. But I would to say much more because of the fact that a lot of the companies are promoter-driven companies who have a majority stake and other things, which anyway they are, their vested interest is anyway there. I think that's first thing which is there. The second thing is today the world is becoming very, very fast moving world. It's a VUCA world, right? It's a volatile, uncertain, very fast moving world. And therefore, risk management becomes extremely important. From a management perspective, they are so glued to business again that sometimes they do not see beyond what is within the four corridors of the organization. And outside in perspective of what is really happening outside, right? Independent directors can basically help identify and assess potential risk, right? From a financial perspective, operational perspective, as well as reputational perspective. I think this is something that I see where is independent directors can add a lot of value. The third area which is there is around strategic guidance. Okay, I think you heard about all of us, bringing in various skill sets and expertise. As Ms. Rama said, right, it is not just a glorified position there you go once a quarter and sign, attend the minutes and sign on the minutes of meeting and come out. Right, there is a lot more responsibility that is there. But is there. You can bring in your expertise and experience to the fore. So how can you bring in that expertise, that value, that can add value to the company is something that one has to really look at. And that therefore, to that extent, while the management to a large extent sometimes gets glued to short-term focus, the board can actually, independent directors can give that long-term focus, because especially if you're a listed company, all of us know you're always under the quarter-on-quarter pressure to deliver to the street, right? So how do you do the right balance between looking at the short-term focus of delivering quarter-on-quarter results, while at the same time not losing focus on the long term, because you don't want a situation where you're taking care of the short term, but you're making yourself unsustainable or unviable over a longer period of time. I think this is one big thing there. The fourth area is around ethical standards and compliance. As an independent director working with, let's say, the audit committee, the internal, external auditors, you can actually bring in that high level of ethical standards and compliance. And that's one area which is there. Of course, most importantly, is stakeholder confidence, right? Today with having independent directors on the board who are also very engaged, it gives the external shareholders and investors a little of confidence, right? There is somebody who is actually looking onto it. It's just not probably promoter-driven decisions and other things. Couple of more areas where I feel there is extreme important is on crisis management. Okay, whenever there's a crisis in the organization, independent directors can provide an unbiased judgment because there is no emotional attachment to decisions that is there, right? As humans, we all have emotional attachments to decisions that we take. So to that extent, filtering out the bias that the management team would have is something which is there. And nowadays, obviously you keep getting crisis, something or the other, right? COVID also was a crisis, and organizations had to quickly assemble and see how do they navigate through that. Last but not the least, though often I can keep talking on, is today it's extremely important to be adaptive and innovative. How can the independent directors can play a huge role there? Because for long-term sustenance, if the companies don't keep adapting and innovating constantly, their some future sustenance is going to be always at risk. And that is where I believe these are the values that independent directors can bring on the table to businesses, which probably sometimes gets a little bit, I would say it's dwindled down because of management's focus, which is more on the transactional stuff, day-to-day stuff.
Okay, so very well said. See how one can add value to the company.